We've all felt it watching an action film unfold, the explosions timed to perfection, the one-liners sharp as a blade, and yet, something doesn't feel right. A character introduced with flair, then suddenly sidelined, a glance that hints at a relationship but never returns, a motive that seems only half explained. It lingers like a missing beat in a song, just enough to make you wonder if you blinked at the wrong moment. But what if you didn't miss anything? What if entire subplots fully written, rehearsed, filmed, were deliberately cut, buried under studio mandates, runtime demands, or fears of controversy? We're not talking deleted scenes or alternate takes. We're talking full narrative arcs, romances erased, conspiracies gutted, timelines reshaped. These weren't edits, these were erasures. Sometimes, the only traces that remain are in leaked scripts, obscure press notes, or a strangely disjointed performance that once belonged to a character who had more to say. And when the dust settles, we're left with action films that pulse with adrenaline but feel hollow in their bones. Why were these storylines removed? Did they test poorly? Threaten to make the protagonist too human? Or were they simply too inconvenient for the myth the movie wanted to build? Whatever the reason, these 15 action films once had more to tell, and what was lost might just be more intriguing than what made it to screen. Let's dive into 15 action movies that had entire subplots removed after shooting and uncover what the studios didn't want you to piece together. Fact Hasson, Stone Cold, 1991. The romance that vanished. She had a name, a storyline, and an entire arc. Then she was gone. Stone Cold was never meant to be subtle. A testosterone-fueled ride of undercover cops and biker gangs, it was designed to explode on screen. But what got detonated off-screen was the film's emotional anchor, a romantic subplot between Joe Huff, Brian Bosworth, and a female character played by Arabella Holdsbaugh. On set, their scenes were central, intimate, tense, even redemptive. They showed Huff struggling with vulnerability beneath the muscle and the mission. But when test audiences didn't respond well, or when execs decided Bosworth needed to appear more untouchable, the romance was axed. Entire dialogue exchanges, intimate sequences, and a dramatic turning point were excised. What remained was Holzbaugh's character reduced to a few brief appearances, stripped of motive or purpose. Behind the scenes, the crew quietly acknowledged it. They'd filmed a deeper story, one where the violence had consequence and connection. Now, all that emotion was left on the cutting room floor. And just like that, a biker gang movie lost its beating heart. But this wasn't the only time a love interest disappeared in the name of macho clarity. Fact #2. The Exterminator, 1980. A war never shown. He fought a war. You just didn't get to see it. The Exterminator was pitched as urban vengeance, gritty, brutal, and unrelenting. But hidden beneath the bloodbath was an entire subplot rooted in trauma. Early drafts and behind-the-scenes notes reveal a series of flashbacks and conversations that trace the protagonist's descent from decorated soldier to street-level vigilante. These weren't filler scenes. They explained everything: his detachment, his obsession with justice, and his emotional deadness. But in the final cut, the entire Vietnam PTSD arc was stripped. One minute, he's in combat. The next, he's burning gangsters alive in warehouses. Why the erasure? Director James Glickenhaus hinted in interviews that the studio feared slowing the film's pace or appearing too introspective. Action sold. Psychology didn't. Ironically, critics panned the film for being empty-headed violence, not realizing the head had been deliberately removed. That shell of a man wasn't always a shell. He was cracked on purpose. And it wouldn't be the last time trauma was too inconvenient to keep. Fact #3. The Peacekeeper, 1997. The Missing Conspiracy. He was supposed to stop a bomb, but something else was ticking under the surface. The Peacekeeper, starring Dolph Lundgren, was sold as a nuclear thriller, an Air Force major racing against time to stop stolen codes from unleashing war. But few know that the film originally featured a parallel CIA subplot, one that painted the entire crisis as a false flag operation gone rogue. Script notes reveal shadow operatives, double agents, and a character named Mason, a CIA analyst who uncovered that the nuclear plot was actually a cover-up for an internal purge. Several scenes were filmed, including cryptic briefings, cutaways to Langley, and Mason's mysterious death. But somewhere between production and post, the subplot vanished. The runtime got tighter, the threat became generic, and the studio walked away from a story that had teeth. Why? Theories range from studio fear of anti-government backlash to distributor demands for simplicity in foreign markets. Whatever the reason, The Peacekeeper went from a layered espionage tale to a one-note chase. And just like that, The real detonator was diffused off-screen. But not every subplot was removed for being too smart. Some were erased for being too dangerous to touch. Fact hash 4. Liberty and Bash. 1989. Politics redacted. It was supposed to be about friendship and justice. But a subplot hinted at something else, something that vanished. Liberty and Bash follows two ex-cops turned street vigilantes, navigating corruption with fists and firepower. But few know the original cut included an overt political thread, one that tied their crusade to a citywide scandal involving land grabs, campaign donations, and a congressman played by a now uncredited actor. Production memos confirm multiple sequences were shot inside a mock City Hall set. The plot thickened as the duo realized their enemies weren't just gangsters, but elected officials profiting from neighborhood decay. It wasn't just street justice, it was systemic exposure. So what happened? Reports suggest the studio, fearing backlash from test audiences already fatigued by Iran-Contra coverage and political cynicism, ordered the subplot removed. According to one editor, they wanted fists, not facts. The character of the congressman was erased. The City Hall scenes scrapped. Only vague references to corruption remained, now detached from real faces or agendas. The result? A film that feels oddly directionless, like it was supposed to land a punch, it suddenly pulled. And a message that once aimed higher, silenced before it could speak. But when politics get cut, the void often speaks louder than the footage. Fact hash 5. Joshua Tree. 1993. The detective that vanished. She was his pursuer. Then she wasn't. In Joshua Tree, Dolph Lundgren plays a fugitive on the run in the desert, pursued by cops, criminals, and fate. But the film we got wasn't the whole chase. Early press kits and script versions confirmed the existence of a major female character, Detective Lisa Calder, a sharp, driven investigator meant to serve as a parallel protagonist. Unlike the hostage character who shares the screen with Lundgren, Calder wasn't there to be saved. She was a mirror, relentless, moral, and increasingly conflicted. She questioned the orders coming from above and eventually uncovered that Lundgren's character may have been set up. Her scenes included surveillance sequences, tense showdowns, and even a face-to-face moment that reframed the entire plot. But none of it made the final cut. Rumors suggest the studio wanted a tighter runtime and a clearer romance angle. Calder's presence made the story morally messy. Others say test audiences didn't respond well to two strong female characters in one film. What's left is a movie that feels like it lost its conscience. The tension flattens, the questions vanish, and one of the most promising subplots turned to dust in the desert wind. But this wasn't the only time an investigator got edited out of their own story. Fact hash 6. Extreme Justice. 1993. The whistleblower silent. He tried to expose them. Then he disappeared from the script. Extreme Justice tells the story of an elite LAPD unit that operates above the law. It's brutal, gritty, and supposedly about accountability. But one man's role was meant to push that theme further. A rookie officer turned whistleblower named Davis, who according to early drafts was the moral backbone of the film. Played in a small capacity in the final version, Davis was originally central. He joined the unit, uncovered their abuses, and began documenting internal violations. Scenes included stolen case files, private conversations with IA, internal affairs, and a climactic moment where he's threatened by his own teammates. But none of that remains. In the release cut, Davis appears in 2 scenes and is never mentioned again. Director Mark L. Lester reportedly fought to keep the arc, but post-production notes demanded focus on the action. Studio executives allegedly feared that turning the lens inward, making cops the true villains, would tank the film's appeal, especially in conservative markets. So Davis was silenced, and with him, the film lost its clearest voice of conscience. It begs the question, when action films remove those who question the system, what are they really trying to say? Fact hash 7. Fair Game. 1995. The family left behind. She was being hunted, but someone was supposed to be looking for her too. In Fair Game, Cindy Crawford plays a civil attorney targeted by the KGB, with William Baldwin as the cop assigned to protect her. The film is sleek, chaotic, and filled with explosions. But something's missing, and not just in the pacing. Initial scripts and casting breakdowns reveal a rich subplot involving Crawford's character's estranged family, specifically a brother who served in the military and whose ties to a classified case drew the KGB's attention in the first place. He wasn't just background, he was the reason she became a target. Multiple scenes were shot, phone calls, a late-night reunion, even a standoff that added emotional weight and narrative logic. But when the film was edited, the entire familial thread was gone. Crawford's character now seems randomly chosen. Her emotional reactions feel unmoored. Why cut it? Insiders suggest that test audiences didn't respond well to the slower domestic scenes. The studio wanted the film faster, louder, simpler, so the subplot was severed, making the chase more confusing and the stakes strangely hollow. It's not just a family that was lost, it was the motive that tied the entire plot together. And what's an action movie without a reason to run? Fact hashite. Deadly Prey 1987. The survivor who knew too much. One man fought his way out. The other was never supposed to talk. Deadly Prey is infamous for its low-budget savagery, a kidnapped veteran hunted for sport. But fans with access to the original shooting script know there was once another survivor. A man named Curtis, who had escaped the jungle before the film's opening scene, and whose story ran parallel to the main arc. Curtis wasn't just a footnote. He had flashback scenes, secret tapes, and even met with a journalist to expose the training program that kidnapped ex-soldiers. The original plan was for his arc to converge with the protagonists in a finale that revealed the hunt wasn't just sport, it was state-sanctioned. The subplot added a conspiratorial layer, suggesting multiple camps across the country and a network of corrupt officials. But during post-production, the footage was shelved. Curtis's role was trimmed to a name on a file. His big moment? Never filmed. Why the change? Some say the budget couldn't sustain 2 timelines. Others point to distribution pressures to keep things under 90 minutes. But the most chilling theory? The producers feared the subplot made the film too real. So the man who escaped never got to speak, and a story about survival lost its proof. Sometimes, silence isn't just absence, it's strategy. Fact #9. The Presidio 1988. The affair that derailed everything. They weren't just solving a murder, they were repeating one. The Presidio pairs Sean Connery and Mark Harmon as military investigators probing a murder inside a high-security army base. The film plays as a procedural with action set pieces, but one subplot could have made it a noir tragedy. Buried in an early draft and briefly mentioned in promotional notes was a cut subplot involving Connery's character and the victim's mother, an affair from decades earlier that tied directly to the murder's motive. In the original version, the murder wasn't random, it was retribution, the consequence of long-buried betrayal. Scenes were shot. One featured Connery's character visiting a cemetery, another had a tense exchange with the woman in question. There was even a confrontation where the murderer revealed he knew the truth about his mother's past. But none of it survived the final cut. Why remove it? Studio executives reportedly felt the subplot overcomplicated the plot and risked undermining Connery's heroism. The character went from a flawed man confronting his past to a clean-cut investigator with a badge and a punch. What remains is a film with crisp pacing and a conspicuous emotional void. And somewhere on a hard drive, the true heart of the Presidio still waits to be uncovered. Fact #0. Navy SEALs 1990. The mission was chaos. But the real chaos got cut. Navy SEALs is remembered, if at all, for its barrage of bullets, Charlie Sheen's smirking rebellion, and a script that seems constantly rewritten mid-shoot. But few recall that an entire early subplot involved a failed mission that haunted the team throughout the film. Originally, the movie opened with a flashback sequence showing a botched rescue op in Beirut, one that resulted in civilian casualties and the death of a team member due to poor intel. This wasn't just backstory, it fueled the lead character's erratic behavior and the distrust between squad members. Every decision they made in the present echoed that trauma. The scenes were filmed. Early reviews from test screenings even mentioned them. But when the studio pushed for a faster runtime and less moral murkiness, the Beirut sequence and its ripple effects were stripped. What's left is a movie with characters acting impulsively, brooding without context, and fighting as if they've already lost something we never saw. They had ghosts. The studio exorcised them, and in doing so, erased the film's only real consequence. Fact #9. Eraser 1996. The mole in the system. Sometimes the most dangerous villain never even appears. In Eraser, Arnold Schwarzenegger plays a U.S. Marshal tasked with protecting a key witness. The film charges forward with high-tech weapons, betrayals, and crocodiles, but originally, it had a shadowier layer, a deep-cover mole embedded inside the witness security program. This mole wasn't just a minor twist. He was meant to be the reason everything went wrong. According to leaked draft scripts and internal memos, the mole had several scenes: sabotaging transport routes, leaking locations, and ultimately confronting Schwarzenegger's character in a final betrayal that tied everything together. So what happened? One insider claimed the subplot tested poorly audiences, found it too complex. Another said budget cuts removed secondary actors, leaving the plot hole unsolvable. Either way, the mole vanished. What remained were action set pieces stitched together by coincidence, with no clear explanation for how the bad guys always stayed one step ahead. It's not that the story didn't make sense, it's that the piece that made it make sense got erased, which is ironic for a film called Eraser. Fact Hasono, The Specialist, 1994. The tapes that changed everything. They wanted revenge, but someone else wanted the truth. The Specialist, starring Sylvester Stallone and Sharon Stone, is a film of sultry violence and slow-burn revenge. But the film once contained a subplot that could have blown the story wide open, a journalist subplot involving a series of surveillance tapes exposing the corruption behind the central murder plot. In the original version, a young reporter tracked down the bombings linked to Stallone's character, eventually uncovering tapes that showed Stone's family being targeted by more than just a mob hit. The tapes revealed collusion between corrupt law enforcement, local politicians, and the criminal underworld. The subplot was bold, messy, and raised the stakes. But when Warner Brothers stepped in to streamline the film into a marketable revenge thriller, the journalist was cut. His scenes disappeared. The tapes were never mentioned again. Left Behind is a movie that pretends it all makes sense, as long as you don't ask why things happen or who was really pulling the strings. They had the evidence. They chose the explosion instead. And once again, action trumped meaning. Fact Hason 3, Black Dog, 1998. The daughter who disappeared. He took the job to protect his family, but one member of that family never made it to screen. In Black Dog, Patrick Swayze plays a trucker forced back behind the wheel for one last dangerous job hauling illegal arms across state lines. The stakes are supposedly personal, his family is at risk, but something in the film feels emotionally underfed. That's because the original script included a daughter, not just a background character, but a central subplot. She was sick, needed surgery, and the money from the job was his desperate bid to save her. Several scenes were shot hospital visits, late-night phone calls, and a breakdown moment when Swayze's character considers abandoning the mission, but none of it remains. Rumors point to studio edits that overcomplicated the plot. Others claim producers wanted a tougher protagonist, less emotionally driven, so the daughter vanished. The scenes were deleted. What's left is a character who keeps saying he needs money for his family but never shows why. Viewers are asked to assume the stakes, but they were filmed. They just never survive. And so, a movie about sacrifice lost the very reason for the sacrifice. Fact Hason 4, Running Scared, 1986. The real crime left untouched. They chased the bad guys, but they were supposed to chase the system too. Running Scared, with Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines, is a buddy cop action comedy with snappy dialogue and slick foot chases. But beneath the humor, there was once a darker layer, a subplot involving systemic corruption inside the Chicago PD. Originally, the two detectives discovered that their informants were being systematically burned by their own department to protect a high-level crime deal. The subplot involved secret tapes, crooked internal affairs officers, and a moment where the protagonists nearly quit the force. Scenes were filmed. Dialogue between Hines and Crystal became tense and philosophical. At one point, they confront their captain in a scene that was praised in internal studio memos as the moral center of the film, but by the final cut, it was gone. Why? Test audiences laughed at the comedy but grew quiet during the introspective scenes. The studio panicked. They wanted laughs, so the subplot was gutted. The moral rot stayed off screen. Now the film plays like a romp, but it once aimed to bite, and the fact that it doesn't anymore may say more than the scenes ever could. Fact Hason 5, Sudden Death, 1995. The twin who wasn't there. One kid was in danger. The other never got mentioned again. Sudden Death stars Jean-Claude Van Damme as a fire marshal trying to stop a terrorist attack during a hockey game while protecting his daughter. But earlier versions of the film featured a twist. The daughter had a twin brother. Both were at the game. Both were in danger. Production reports show that scenes were filmed with both children, one hidden in the VIP box, the other in a concession area. The tension was doubled. Van Damme had to protect two lives while navigating two threats. In fact, the original third-act climax had him choosing who to save first, but after a re-edit demanded by Universal, the twin was cut, his scenes deleted, dialogue redubbed to make the daughter the sole child. The reason? Test audiences reportedly found the two-child dynamic too stressful. It shifted the tone from thrilling to nerve-shredding. So the brother disappeared. His role was erased from marketing, credits, and even the shooting script used in press kits. The stakes were once higher, the decisions more painful. Now, we only know what was lost if we know where to look. Fact Hasson 5. Sudden death, 1995. The twin who wasn't there. One kid was in danger, the other never got mentioned again. Sudden Death stars Jean-Claude Van Damme as a fire marshal trying to stop a terrorist attack during a hockey game while protecting his daughter. But earlier versions of the film featured a twist. The daughter had a twin brother. Both were at the game. Both were in danger. Production reports show that scenes were filmed with both children, one hidden in the VIP box, the other in a concession area. The tension was doubled. Van Damme had to protect two lives while navigating two threats. In fact, the original third-act climax had him choosing who to save first. But after a re-edit demanded by Universal, the twin was cut, his scenes deleted, dialogue redubbed to make the daughter the sole child. The reason? Test audiences reportedly found the two-child dynamic too stressful. It shifted the tone from thrilling to nerve-shredding, so the brother disappeared. His role was erased from marketing, credits, and even the shooting script used in press kits. The stakes were once higher, the decisions more painful. Now, we only know what was lost, if we know where to look. We often think we know these films, the explosions, the heroes, the villains, but buried beneath the final cuts are stories we were never meant to see, subplots that added depth, conscience, even danger. They were written, filmed, then erased. So now we ask, which of these missing storylines do you wish had stayed in? And more importantly, what other action films left you with that nagging sense something was gone? Let us know. We're still piecing together what they tried to bury.